Adam Winkler, Gunfight, the battle over the right to bear arms in America. Embark on a journey through the often divisive history and interpretations of the Second Amendment, as explored in Adam Winkler's Gunfight, the battle over the right to bear arms in America. Delve into spirited arguments from gun rights supporters, gun control advocates, and the complex legal battles fought over the years. Discover the true meaning of the Second Amendment and examine the roles various organizations, including the NRA, have played in shaping America's relationship with firearms. Throughout this summary, you'll gain insight into the evolution of attitudes towards gun ownership and control, revelations about racism and law enforcement, as well as landmark Supreme Court decisions that continue to shape the debate today.
Decoding the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution remains vague in its true meaning. Although gun advocates believe that the amendment prohibits government interference of any sort and allows unfettered gun ownership, gun control supporters argue that individuals' right to arm themselves is not addressed, only the state's ability to marshal a National Guard or similar force. Federal courts for decades favored the latter view of gun control advocates. A 1939 U.S. Supreme Court decision was ambiguous and unclear, leading to divergent interpretations of the amendment, making it a topic of ongoing debate. Gun control debate. The U.S. has a complicated relationship with guns, with people on both sides of the issue. Some gun enthusiasts resist laws that limit gun ownership by the mentally ill, while others hold the view that a gun-free society is possible. The country has more than 280 million guns in circulation, according to reports. Even Charlton Heston, former NRA president, famously said that he would only surrender his guns from his cold, dead hands. The gun control debate continues to be a divisive issue in America. An unpopular history of the NRA and gun control. The National Rifle Association, NRA, was founded in 1871 to improve the marksmanship of Union troops in the Civil War, not to fight against gun laws. However, the organization didn't shift its rhetoric on gun control until the 1960s. Today, the NRA opposes even the mildest of gun control measures. The organization is also known for opposing bans on highly damaging, cop-killer, bullets, which has alienated many law enforcement officials. Even after the tragic mass shooting at Columbine High School, the NRA has continued to oppose tighter restrictions on sales at gun shows. This book exposes the misunderstood history of the relationship between the NRA and gun control. The dark truth about gun control. Gun control in America has a disturbing history rooted in racism. The Ku Klux Klan supported and promoted gun control as a means of disarming black Americans whom they saw as easy targets. In the early 1960s, a civil rights activist in North Carolina received death threats from the Klan. Her attorney armed himself with 2 weapons to protect her as he couldn't rely on the police, who were more likely to support the Klan than the activist. This is just one example of unarmed citizens becoming victims of armed tyranny by vigilantes and government indifference. The discredited gun control research. Emory University professor Michael Belisles published a book called Arming America in 2000, claiming that only a few Americans owned guns in the 17th and 18th centuries, and gun control advocates established it as a breakthrough. Later, it was found that Belisles falsified his research, leading to his resignation from the Emory University and rescinded major awards. The incident was a significant blow to gun control's credibility, demonstrating that despite the ambitions of some advocates, guns are not going away anytime soon. The origin of American Revolution. In 1775, King George III's decision to order the seizure of American colonists' guns amplified unrest under colonial rule and led to the American Revolution. Although the Founding Fathers believed in the importance of firearms, they did not endorse unregulated gun ownership. For example, men in Massachusetts were required to present their weapons in public. Contrary to popular belief, the first law passed in Dodge City, a Wild West town, was a ban on concealed weapons. The author argues that the potential to revive reason in the gun debate lies in the court's ruling that civilian disarmament is impermissible. The NRA versus gun opponents. The NRA has been able to outmaneuver gun opponents in Congress, leaving them to turn to the courts through lawsuits that aim to ban some guns. Former President Bill Clinton's administration passed a law banning certain features of assault rifles, which ended up boosting gun sales and energizing the NRA. However, the ban eventually expired in 2004. DC's gun ban and its ramifications. In 1975, a burglary in Maryland led John Heckinger, owner of Heckinger's Hardware and a DC council member, to push for a gun ban on civilian possession of handguns in the District of Columbia, DC. The National Rifle Association, NRA, and gun control opponents were against the law, while proponents hoped it would trigger a wave of strict gun laws. The law did not deter crime and only affected law-abiding citizens. Shelley Parker, a former nurse, wanted to own a gun for protection but was unable to do so because of the law. In 2002, libertarian lawyers from the Institute for Justice pursued the case of Parker v. District of Columbia as they believed the law was an unconstitutional restraint of individual liberty. The lawyers convinced an unknown solo practitioner, Alan Gura, to take the case. The case ultimately led to a landmark decision by the Supreme Court in 2008, declaring that the Second Amendment provides an individual with the right to possess firearms for lawful purposes. This ruling considerably affected gun control legislation across the United States. Upholding or maiming individual gun rights. The Supreme Court cautiously avoided addressing the Second Amendment until an inexperienced advocate named Gura brought the Parker case, which became the Heller v. District of Columbia. The NRA opposed the case as they believed it had no chance of winning. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, firearms were collected from innocent civilians despite no sign of law enforcement. The NRA's greatest fundraising method is to arouse public anxiety, claiming that the Second Amendment is under threat. However, a verdict in favor of gun rights could backfire on the organization, potentially putting its campaign in jeopardy. NRA's attempt to block gun law challenge. The NRA attempted to derail a challenge to the constitutionality of DC's gun law by urging the inclusion of an irrelevant issue and consolidating their own suit with the plaintiffs. The plaintiff's attorney, Gura, refused to include the distraction and was seen by the NRA as an inadequate choice for a landmark case. Undeterred, the NRA turned to Senator Orrin Hatch, who introduced a bill that would nullify the city's ban and circumvent the constitutional question. Second Amendment victory. In 2006, a federal appellate court ruled that individual Americans had the right to own guns under the Second Amendment. The ruling followed a legal precedent that only militias had this right. The NRA, under Carter's leadership, became a powerful force in American politics with a rigid stance on gun control. However, in 2007, the Virginia Tech massacre weakened Congress's willingness to expand gun rights, and the Supreme Court agreed to hear DC's appeal on the matter. The court, having swung right during George W. Bush's second term, ultimately upheld the right to bear arms for individuals. A supreme debate on gun rights. During a crucial hearing, Supreme Court justices debated an individual's right to bear arms, with conservative judges being seen as reliable supporters. However, Justice Anthony Kennedy's stance was uncertain. Justice Scalia argued that pioneers needed guns for protection against outlaws and bears. Other judges had predictable lines of questioning, with Justice Roberts skeptical of long guns used for household defense and their required trigger locks. Roberts suggested that the homeowner would fumble to find his glasses while the intruder broke in. Ultimately, the case rested on Kennedy, whose position could go either way. Gura's fight for gun regulation. Attorney Alan Gura made a case for the constitutionality of regulating firearms, winning a pivotal 5-4 Supreme Court decision against DC's ban. While Gura believed in government's right to regulate firearms, his approach was seen as a betrayal by gun proponents. The Supreme Court later ruled that while government can't broadly ban gun ownership, it can impose reasonable regulations. Gura's efforts led to a wave of lawsuits challenging gun control measures. His victory solidified the debate around gun ownership and regulation in the United States.
Winkler's Gunfight skillfully unravels the intricate history of the battle over the right to bear arms in America, exposing both the triumphs and shortcomings of laws, organizations, and legal precedents. While constitutional interpretations play a significant role, it is the passionate advocacy on either side that often determines the outcome of gun control disputes. The book ultimately emphasizes the importance of understanding the complexities between gun rights and gun control, and suggests that a common-sense approach is needed to seek a middle ground in order to create effective policies that balance individual freedom and public safety. As both past and present are scrutinized, readers are left with a deeper comprehension of the ongoing struggle in America's gun debate.